October 2nd, 2012. Kapisa Province in the mountains of northeastern Afghanistan. The grenade lands 11 feet from a wounded American soldier lying in the open. Second Lieutenant Nicholas Dockery does not step back. He steps forward, plants his own body between the blast and the man on the ground, and takes what the earth cannot give back. Around him, roughly 150 Taliban fighters are dug into high ground on every side. Dust hangs in the air. His platoon is pinned down on open ground with no cover and nowhere to retreat to. Reinforcements are 100 yards away, across terrain with no cover at all. This is the moment nobody in that valley expects him to walk away from. He was 24 years old, a second lieutenant 7 months into his first combat deployment, leading a platoon of American and Afghan National Army soldiers through terrain built for an ambush. It was one deployment among thousands during the long years of the Afghanistan War, on a day that would have gone unrecorded outside a unit history if not for what Dockery chose to do in it. What happened next would earn him the Nininger Award for Valor almost immediately, a West Point honor reserved for extraordinary heroism in combat. And decades later, the nation's highest award for valor, the Medal of Honor. This is Echoes of Valor X. Today we tell the true story of Nicholas Dockery, the soldier the United States government waited 14 years to fully recognize. Dockery was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, and raised primarily by his grandmother. As a teenager, he was sent to St. John's Military School in Salina, Kansas. Flat country, wind-scoured, the kind of landscape that teaches a person early how fast life can change. At 16, he saw exactly that. A tornado tore through Hoisington, Kansas, 70 miles from his school, with winds reaching 200 miles an hour. You see what a 200-mile-an-hour wind, ripping through a small rural town, can do to homes. It levels them. He volunteered alongside classmates to dig through the wreckage. What stayed with him was not the damage. It was the strangers who drove in from across the state to help people they had never met. I saw people of all ages helping those who had lost everything they had. 5 months later, in a second-period math class, he watched 2 commercial airliners strike the World Trade Center. We all huddled around the television, confused and afraid. We watched buildings crumble. In 2004, Dockery applied to West Point. He was rejected. Most 18-year-olds would have taken that as a final answer. He enlisted instead as an infantryman in the Indiana Army National Guard, assigned to a long-range surveillance detachment of the 38th Infantry Division. He completed basic combat training, infantry training, and airborne school at Fort Benning, Georgia, earning his jump wings before he ever wore an officer's rank. In 2005, he transferred to the New Mexico Army National Guard and enrolled at the New Mexico Military Institute, still pushing toward the academy that had turned him away once already. In 2007, West Point accepted him. By then, the New Mexico Guard had offered him a guaranteed officer's commission, real rank, a real career, no further risk. Dockery turned it down to start over at West Point as a plebe, with no rank at all. He commissioned as an infantry officer in 2011. A rejection letter had cost him 3 years. It did not cost him the uniform. Kapisa Province sits in the mountains of northeastern Afghanistan, narrow valleys, steep high ground, terrain that gives every advantage to whoever holds the ridgeline. It was one of the more contested provinces of the war, patrolled jointly by American forces and the Afghan National Army as part of the broader effort to hand off security to Afghan units. On October 2nd, 2012, Dockery's platoon moved through exactly that kind of ground alongside their Afghan partners. The ambush came from roughly 150 Taliban fighters, dug into elevated firing positions with a clear line down onto the road below. It was not a small raid. It was a coordinated assault meant to trap an entire platoon in open ground. Within minutes, American and Afghan soldiers were pinned down with nowhere to move. Men were wounded and could not walk. A grenade landed near one of Dockery's soldiers. Dockery reached him first. He shoved the man behind what little cover existed, put his own body between the soldier and the blast, and began treating his wounds, while enemy rounds struck the ground around them. There was no time to call for help and wait. The nearest friendly forces were 100 yards away, open terrain, no cover, the kind of ground every soldier in that valley would have called a straight line to getting shot. Here's where it gets strange. Dockery did not wait for reinforcements to reach him. He crossed the 100 yards of open ground himself, under direct fire, to reach the rest of his forces and organize a response. He then led a team into a multi-level compound the Taliban were using as cover. Clearing a building room by room means going through a doorway, not knowing who or what is on the other side. Over and over, one enemy fighter was killed in the process. 2 more were detained. The fight outside was not finished. Dockery helped a wounded soldier back to his feet. When 2 enemy fighters closed in on another injured man nearby, Dockery engaged and killed both before they reached him. Every decision, in a battle that had already run for hours, was still his to make alone. When the order came to withdraw, most platoon leaders would have moved with their men. Dockery stayed behind. Alone, he laid down covering fire so the wounded could be evacuated first. Then, as the Taliban pushed a final assault to overrun the retreating column, Dockery directed a coordinated, rocket-propelled grenade strike into their position. The assault broke. Every soldier in his platoon made it out of Kapisa Province alive. For what Dockery did that day, the army recognized him almost immediately with the Nininger Award for Valor. The nation's highest recognition, the Medal of Honor, took far longer, 14 years longer. Under normal rules, the window to award it had already closed. It took an act of Congress, a bill written and carried specifically to authorize the award for a battle more than a decade in the past, before the paperwork could even reach the president's desk. On June 18, 2026, in the East Room of the White House, President Donald Trump placed the Medal of Honor around Nicholas Dockery's neck. He stood beside 2 other men honored that same day, Colonel John Ripley and Major James Capers Jr., whose valor came from a different war decades earlier in Vietnam. 3 conflicts, 3 Americans, 1 ceremony, 14 years after the fact for at least one of them. Dockery did not describe himself as exceptional. In remarks the following day, he turned the moment back toward the country that had waited 14 years to say thank you.
We shouldn't have to wait for the next tragedy to remember why we love this country.
Nicholas Dockery retired from active duty in May 2026, closing a career that began with a rejection letter and ended in the East Room of the White House. He did not walk away from service. He redirected it. In 2025, he founded the Nicholas Dockery Foundation, funding art and equine therapy programs for veterans carrying wounds no metal can address, the ones that never show up on an X-ray, the ones a 100-yard run under fire can leave behind long after the war is over. That same year, he began an MBA at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, studying quantitative finance, with graduation expected in 2027. The same discipline that once meant reapplying to West Point after a rejection now means building spreadsheets and a foundation instead of clearing rooms. The boy who once dug through a flattened Kansas town. The cadet rejected once and accepted the second time. The lieutenant who ran 100 yards into gunfire alone. All of it led to a man who now spends his time building something instead of only surviving it. 14 years passed between the grenade in Kapisa Province and the medal in the East Room. Nicholas Dockery spent every one of those years still standing. America still stands because of men like this. Subscribe, so these men are never forgotten.